Hi, we are back for another edition of Love at First Right. I am Victoria Doherty, and for those of you who have not been watching Love at First Right, it is my vlog chronicling my endeavors to write a great epic romance. I am historically a historical thriller writer, and I have, over the past few years, I've sort of evolved into kind of being inspired to write something really epic and romantic, and something much more in much more in the lines of something like Dr. Zhivago, than maybe a very sort of sweet uh, romance novel. And anyway, this is my blog chronicling those endeavors. And this week, I have wanted to talk about this for so long. I have wanted to talk about editing and drafts. Now, on the surface, that may seem like a not so exciting topic since we've been talking about love and love scenes and characters and how to develop really interesting characters. But I'm going to challenge you on this, and I think that once this vlog episode is over, I think that you're going to be with me when I say that I think editing is where all of the magic happens, and that it is actually the most exciting part of writing a story. Now, first, I do have Barney, my Boston Terrier, on my lap, and he's asleep, so I won't pick him up and disturb him. But you may hear the occasional snorting and snoring, which is something that he does, and he also occasionally farts. So, anyway, it is what it is, and we're just going to have to put up with it as part of life. And he's just ever so sweet on my lap, and I enjoy having him there. Okay, so editing. Let me tell you where I am with my story. I am about on the third draft. Now, what does that mean? It means that it is less bad than the first draft. I think that for people who are maybe just starting out as writers, or people who are readers and really don't know about the writing process, especially long form writing like a novel, I think people don't really, people who are not in the know in that way, don't really understand just how bad first drafts can be, and usually are. And this is not a bad thing. For me, a first draft is something that you got to just get out the idea, and you really haven't fleshed it out. And sometimes often I know when I'm writing badly, when I'm not writing at my best, but the idea, it just keeps coming and and keeps coming, and I don't want to lose it, and there's something about the freshness of the idea. It's just not the same if you write down the idea and then the next day you try to capture it. And so I really try to get it down as quickly as possible, and that's not so quick in my case. I'm a notoriously slow writer, but I do try to get the first draft down as quickly as possible, and do all the magic, all the real magic gets sprinkled in during the editing process. Now, it's funny, I hear a lot of writers complain about editing, that they just hate to do it. That, oh, I think, and I understand it, because I think that once you finish that first draft, you've put so much effort into it. And I do not want to make it seem like I haven't put so much effort into it. The first draft is by far the hardest part for me. It is really making sense of the story, and determining really whether it's got legs and whether it's going to go anywhere. And if you do determine that, and then you start editing and editing, that's when you truly breathe life into it, and have it has the potential to be great. You have the potential to make it great. Um, Now, a lot of writers, as I was going to say, you might hear them complain about the editing process. I certainly do. I know a lot of people who absolutely hate editing, and I am of the opposite school. I love it. I absolutely love the editing process. It's just the darndest thing. I struggle more with the first draft. I don't not enjoy writing the first draft, but I definitely struggle more with it. And I feel like once I start editing, I'm really sinking my teeth into this story. I am just, I am discovering things about my characters and about the plot that I didn't even realize I'd written in to that first draft. I mean, I'm on my third draft of my epic romance, and I just invented a new character and realized that this character had been there all along. It was just the craziest thing, and it made all the sense in the world. And I can see this manuscript slowly evolving and changing and becoming what I hopefully becoming what I've always wanted it to be. And it was not that at the first draft. I can tell you that much. I was very, very disappointed isn't the right word, but I was not at all pleased with the way the first draft um, turned out. I knew it wasn't where my ambitions for this project were. I knew it was nowhere near that. And I knew that I had a lot to do and a long way to go. Now, right now, and with the way publishing is evolving, there is there's this real pressure on writers, and it's absolutely understandable to write very quickly and get as many books out as possible. Um, I'm I can't. I've tried, and I just have come to this point where I've realized that I just can't be one of those writers. I do not have that skill, and I think that to develop that skill, I guess I suppose I could develop it. A friend of mine is like, "Yes, you could," and she actually writes very quickly and wonderfully, um, which I am envious of in the best way. My husband is the same way. He is a very fast, but very, very good writer. In fact, he's one of the best. But if you subscribe to the notion that in order to be really good at something, you have to devote 10,000 hours to it, and I do subscribe to that. I think in both of those cases, both my friend and my husband actually have put 10,000 hours into learning how to write very succinctly and very quickly. My husband has spent a career writing speeches for all sorts of people, business people and politicians and all of this. And you have to be very, very succinct. And that is a sort of training, and it's a training that I lack. But I want to talk a little bit more about why first drafts are so terrible and why that is a wonderful thing. Why they are an incredible starting block for real magic, and that you should never, ever, ever give up on a manuscript because you don't like the first draft. Now, that doesn't mean that every manuscript that you finish will be wonderful and beautiful and is going to turn into a fantastic piece of art or a bestseller, but you are absolutely selling yourself short if you do not understand that once you finish the first draft, you are only halfway there. Yikes. I know that's very depressing, but it's true. You are only halfway there. You have no idea. In the editing, you uncover ghosts. You uncover mysteries. You uncover little gems that you didn't even realize that you hid in the initial manuscript. You uncover the atmosphere. You uncover the music that's playing in the background throughout the entire novel. You uncover the nuances of your characters' desires, of their deepest desires, of the why. Of the why of everything that they do. And you are able to pump up all the different elements that perhaps are only whispered in the first draft. You're able to pump up the conflict, which makes the reading all the more interesting. You're able to pump up the humor, which will draw more people in and hopefully bring people together, with a shared laugh, with being able to laugh at themselves as well as a situation. It pumps up the beauty. It pumps up the ugliness and the violence and the love, and if appropriate, the sensuality, the sex. And it brings all of these elements to the surface so that, once you do finish and once you've gone through several drafts, for me, the lucky number is usually about 13. And once you've gone through many of these drafts, and all of these things bubble up to the surface, it really does become such a meal for the reader, a really wonderful 10-course meal, instead of just sort of the fast service cafeteria slop, right? That all of our first drafts are, even those of us who are really good at first drafts. Even my husband, who is absolutely marvelous at first drafts, his first drafts are not quite up to par. But I do want to tell a little bit of a story, because you don't have to take my word for it. Years ago, I was listening to a radio program, and I believe it was a book. Anyway, I believe this book came out, and it was all about F. Scott Fitzgerald's first draft, The Great Gatsby. Oh, Barney. It was all about F. Scott Fitzgerald's first draft of The Great Gatsby, okay? And it was about F. Scott Fitzgerald's relationship with his editor, and with how the editor helped Fitzgerald turn The Great Gatsby into a masterpiece. Now, what was so amazing to me was not so much the editing process, because I was already familiar with the editing process by the time I was listening to this story. But what was so incredible was, I'd never been privy to the first draft of a master. I've been privy to the first drafts of my friends' work, people who I think are hugely talented, but not people who that I think of as F. Scott Fitzgerald. That is just, someone who is truly on a pedestal. And of course, I've been privy to my own terrible first drafts. But, reading the very pedestrian, and there really is no other word for it, pedestrian prose of Fitzgerald's first draft was so enlightening, and it was so heartening, because here, this man who is one of the greatest writers, certainly one of the greatest writers of the 20th century, arguably one of the greatest published writers of all time, and he had what all of us have, which is a great idea and a crappy first draft. And he needed someone else. He knew that it had problems, and he needed someone else to help guide him through that process. It's why I so value my relationship with my editors. I actually chose the editor who is editing my this epic romance, who edited the first draft, and who will be doing another pass at it once I'm finished with my subsequent drafts. But I actually chose her because she did not flatter me. Does that make sense? She read the manuscript. She was very matter of fact about it. She was incredibly reasonable. She said exactly what she liked. She said exactly where she thought it might have problems. She said exactly what she didn't like. And I love that. It doesn't mean that I will always agree with her, but even when I start out disagreeing, provided that you have a good editor, and I really, really recommend that you don't just ask your Aunt Sally to edit your manuscript, writers out there, okay? Get a real editor. It's worth it. I loved the fact that she without, there was nothing biting in what she was saying. She really was looking at it with such a cold eye, and even the things that I initially didn't agree with her about, and that I was very attached to in my first draft. And basically, as I was going through her comments, I was like, yes, yes, no, yes, yes, no, I'm not going to take that advice. Now that I'm on my third draft of this, I'm finding that I'm going back and actually taking the advice that I was going to kick to the curb, and that's something that that is a pattern actually, that I see, not just with me, but with other writers. And so, you know, if you trust your editor, they are usually right. And if you are too attached to something and it's not working, you do usually have to let it go. And when you do let that go, it often opens up a whole new world in your work. It sprinkles the magic dust throughout your manuscript, because sometimes just letting go of one thing has such a ripple effect that that it casts a spell over the entire story. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I will see you next time.